Selamat pagi. Senang bertemu Anda. And then I will switch to English. I'm sorry. But I'm very happy to meet you all. And I would, of course, like to start by thanking our host, all the involved authorities, the Directorate General of Intellectual Property, and of course the Indonesian Customs as well. And I am very much excited to be with you for this workshop during 2 days. And as Mr. Meshati mentioned, those are not lectures, those are really sharing experiences and sharing our knowledge, our common knowledge, to be able to tackle also our common challenges. So I am very happy to be with you today, very honored. If I can share this personal comment, this is my first time in Indonesia. So for me, this is also a very, very nice experience to be with you. I would like, obviously, to say hello to our colleagues online, to my colleagues connecting from Europe. I think it's still quite early for Europe now, so I'm not sure they are all connected. But if they are, I thank them for their participation. And as you saw on the agenda, the objective of my presentation is to give an overview of the phenomenon. We're talking about intellectual property crimes. This is how I will refer to the issue, not only counterfeiting, but IP crime in general. And this is the agenda that I have prepared for my presentation. I would like to cover with you the state of play, but to do this, I would like to explain a bit what are the sources of information, because this is obviously quite important. If you don't know the phenomenon, you cannot fight against it properly. And then I will also show you some case examples in the European Union with some recent investigation, to show you a bit the type of issues that we face in the EU. And also I will say a few words on the joint operations that law enforcement authorities at EU level are developing to fight against intellectual property crime. The first part of my presentation contains a lot of figures, a lot of statistics. Apologies for this in advance, but I think this is useful because, again, if we don't know what we are talking about, we cannot fight it properly and we cannot implement the proper measures. So, when we want to know what's going on with IP crime in the world, what do we look at? Well, I'm very happy and thankful to Mr. Meshati because you already did part of the job for me, because you did indeed refer to those reports. As you understand, this is quite complicated to have very precise figures over the phenomenon at global level. So analyzing data has limitation, of course, and there are not that many reports that can give you a global overview. But those reports are among the only ones, reliable one, of course, able to give you an insight on the issue of IP crime and global trades. And those are reports which are jointly published by the EU Intellectual Property Office and the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Especially, they have a task force on countering illicit trade, and those reports are drafted in this context. So those joint reports started in 2016. So you see now almost 10 years ago, and that allows us to have an overview of the evolution and the trends. You see the last 2 editions on the slides. The last one, as as Mr. Meshati mentioned earlier, was just published May 2025. So it contains the latest figures, and those are the figures I will present. Then another very useful source, and I'm sure all our customs colleagues will know it, is the annual report on illicit trade from the World Customs Organization. It's also a report which has been published for many years, since 2012. So it's also very useful to see the evolution and the trends. And this one compiles the seizures which are reported by the countries members of the World Customs Organization. And as you know, there are quite many. WCO has 185 members, and that represents 98% of the trades. The limitation with this report is that the reporting is done on a voluntary basis, so not all countries report the seizures. But still, it gives you quite a good idea of the trends. And this report is that you see on the screen is from 2023. And for this report, 62 countries reported seizures of counterfeit goods. So again, not all the world, but still quite a good way to have an insight on global trade and the impact of IP crime. Then at European level, we have also an important source of information, which is also an annual report jointly published by the EU IPO and the General Directorate in charge of customs of the Commission, DG Taxud. And this report gathers the seizures of counterfeit goods done at the EU external borders, but also now done within the internal markets. So it gives us also quite a good overview of what's happening at the border and inside the EU. And as you also reminded us, the EU is a common market of 450 million citizens, so consumers. So this report is published annually with the data of the previous year. So the figures I will present you now are from 23, and the next report with the figures of 24 will be published before the end of this year. But that's also quite a good source of information, and I will present you the figures to give you an overview of the situation at EU level. Now, at EU level, if you are also interested, we also have other sources of information which go beyond the mere seizures of counterfeit products, but also analyze the involvement of organized crime. And this was actually mentioned in the opening remarks as well. We are talking about a system with different actors and an ecosystem of crimes. So not only IP, and we have at EU level, well, one main report evaluating the threat when we talk about organized crime, and this is called the Serious Organized Crime Threat Assessment. This is published by Europol, which is the European Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation, police and customs, all law enforcement authorities. And this also gives a good insight on the modus operandi of the criminal networks involved in IP crime, but not only. It covers all types of serious crimes within the EU. But then also specifically on IP crime, we have a threat assessment which has been published for the first time in 2019, and there was an edition in 2022, only dedicated to intellectual property crime, also based on the information, the intelligence gathered by Europol and shared by the European countries. So this can also be a good source of information if you want to go further. You have the QR code on the slide, and that takes you to the web page where you can download those reports. And one last one I wanted to share with you, because this is also an interesting one to see the connection between all types of crimes. It's a report that was also jointly published by the EU IPO and Europol, and it's called Uncovering the Ecosystem of IP Crimes. So also with the objective to show the different connections, what types of crimes facilitate IP crimes, and the other way around, how IP crime supports other types of crime. And this one was published in October 2024, so quite recent as well. Obviously, don't try to read them all in one go, because they are quite heavy, they are quite long. But if you are interested, this can be a useful source of information for you. Just one word, I will not cover it, because this is not the scope of our workshop, but we also monitor the threat when it comes to piracy. And we also have a number of reports covering piracy and copyright infringements in the EU, but also globally. You see, this is those two studies that we published recently. We monitor, for instance, the consumption within the European Union, so the 27 member states, but also the UK, to see who and how the consumption of illicit online content is done. So this is also interesting for you if you want to have a look. All those publications are available on our website. Again, you have the QR code. Everything is free, publicly available. The two reports I showed you, the SOCTA, the SOCTA, you have a restricted version only for law enforcement, but there is a public version. So if you want to have a look, it's available online and you can download them. So those are the sources of information. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it is really important to be able to have precise data to be able to implement efficient measures and actions. It is complicated. The reporting is very complicated. At EU level, we often have complaints from customs because it's hard to report. Nobody wants to report. Custom officers, they want to stop the goods. They want to do their cases. They don't want to say what they've done. But this is essential, because if you don't have a clear view of what is going on, you cannot have efficient risk profiles. So this is quite important. Now, with all those sources of information, what do they tell us, and what is the state of play? So again, Mr. Meshati has been doing my work, and I thank him. Those are the figures at global level. We see that the trade of counterfeit and pirated goods is estimated to amount to 410 billion euros. And that would represent 2.5% of the global trades. And at EU level, so those are the figures from the OECD report, it was equal to 119 billion euros. You have the amount in dollars as well that you mentioned, Mr. Meshati. But those are the figures from 2019. So where are we now? In 2021, again, latest figures available. It takes time to analyze all this data. Well, at global level, this is a bit less. All things compared, obviously. And we are talking about 398 billion euros, equal 2.3% of the global trade. So it has decreased a bit, meaning that our efforts have some impact. And in the EU, it has decreased a bit. But still, those numbers, I think we all agree to say that they are not acceptable, and we should not have, ideally, any counterfeit goods in global trades. Now, what it means in terms of seizures, and those are the numbers of the World Customs Organization in 2023. 62 countries reported the seizures of 98 million articles, and they reported in total a little more than 48,000 seizures. So this is the data that has been analyzed by the World Customs Organization to study the roots and the phenomenon. But this is what we have at world level when we talk about seized articles and the number of cases. Now, within Europe and at the EU borders, those are the numbers we have. You will see they are bigger than the numbers of the WCO because they contain the seizures which are done in the internal markets by national authorities. So we are talking about more than 152 million articles seized for a value of 3.4 billion euros. Retail value. So you see, obviously, why criminals are interested, because you can make a lot of money with this type of goods. Now, if you allow me, I will give you a bit more information on the situation in the European Union, so you can better understand the challenges and also the mechanisms that my colleagues will present to you during the rest of the workshop. So those are the numbers of seizures and the estimated values in the last 5 years, since 2020. Do I have no. Ooh. Sorry. The dark blue part are the seizures done within the internal markets, and at the external border, it's the light blue part. So you see 14 million articles at the external border, but now more and more seizures within the internal market. But if we focus on customs and the external borders, then we have 14 million items for a retail value of almost 811 million euros. And at the external borders, we had 67,983 cases reported. We had a slight increase in the number of cases compared to the year before, but the number of seized items has decreased a bit, well, quite a bit, almost 30% less. And also the value of the seized goods has decreased. And the fact that the value decrease also means that we see more and more counterfeit everyday items. So not only luxury goods, but everyday life items, let's say. You see on the chart the peaks as well in 2021, which we believe is related to the COVID pandemic and the increase of postal shipments. Now, when we talk about the categories of goods, this is also something which is interesting to look at and to study. Those are the numbers in quantities, not in cases. So overall, in the internal market and that the EU border. And you see the first category, it's games. So also going back to the topic of health and safety, this is also quite dangerous. So it means the criminals are also targeting our children. Then we have toys as a second category. So also, let's say a vulnerable audience. And then you see on the chart, we also have two categories, which are labels, tags, and stickers, and packaging materials. And it's among the top 5 category. And this also illustrates a trend that we see more and more in Europe, namely that the assembling phase of the product is now done within the EU. So we see less import of goods bearing counterfeit trademarks or a clear IP rights being infringed, but we see production sites within Europe and also product being assembled at the very last moment just before the sale. I will go back to this when I show you the case examples. Now, So those the figures I showed you were internal markets and external borders. Now, when we look at the categories only at the external borders, this is a bit different. But so first of all, you see that the category other is the biggest one, meaning that all the products seized by customs are very diverse, meaning also that, as I told you, we need also to enhance our data reporting so we have a clearer view. Because obviously this big, diverse and other category, it's a bit hard to analyze. But then you also see that the category packaging material is also one of the highest at the external border. So that confirms the trend that I just mentioned, that the trademarks and the infringing material is sent apart and also come from abroad, but the final phase of the production, the fabrication of the manufacturing of the product is done within the EU. And then you also see at the external border toys in the 4th position and also clothing. And at the end of the list, you can see on the slide, we also have what we call fast-moving consumer goods, so easy things that everybody can buy. And we have lighters, for instance. We have food as well. So everyday item. At world level, it's a bit different. But again, as I told you, the reporting methods are a bit different. And we see in 2023 that the number of, clothing is the first category in the number of article. And then we also have games and toys at world level, meaning that this is definitely a global trend. Now, when we talk about the origins and the roots, so those are the figures at the EU external borders. China is the first country of provenance. I think this is pretty clear on the slide. Then it's followed by all the other countries, which is 1/4 of the seized articles. And then you see Hong Kong and Turkey accounts approximately for 9% of the seized items. When we look at the number of products coming from China, clothing, accessories is the most detained category of products. From Hong Kong, the most detained category is label, tags, and stickers. And when it comes about Turkey, clothing is also the first category of product which is detained by European customs. But then when we look at the value of the seized products, then the ranking of countries differs slightly. China is still on top of the list with over 65% of the total. It's followed by Hong Kong with over 17%. And then we have Turkey with over 5% of the value of the seized goods. But globally, in terms of number of articles and value of articles, China is clearly number one. Then when we want to look at the roots, so we don't have this type of information at EU level, this level of details. But here you can see on the chart the breakdown of cases and of seized articles by European member states. And you see that the highest numbers correspond more or less to the main entry point of the EU. So 10 member states accounted for almost 91% of the total of cases and over 88% of the total numbers of articles detained. And then we have Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Spain appearing in the top 10, both in terms of numbers of seized articles and number of cases. And again, that corresponds to the major harbors, for instance, and the major points of entry within Europe. And I don't say more about other countries because I know my colleagues will do that later on. Then I just wanted also to show you this. This is a graph from the WCO, and I think it illustrates quite well the flows. And it confirms that at world level as well, China is the main country of origin. You see, this is China, this is Europe, and you see the flows. This is America, and this is an unknown data for the origin of the goods, but we could assume that it's also that China might be also, let's say Asia Pacific might be also involved. But you see the clear trends here. That's the trafficking flows by region in 2023. And the WCO also did a heat map, which I find quite illustrative of the flows. So those are the number of instances. So regardless of the country who reported the seizures or the origin, but those are just the number of instances where an IP case has been, in which one country appear in the statistics. So you see, obviously, North America and Asia, they appear more than 500 instances, and then obviously Europe and a bit Latin America as well. Now going to the means of transport in the EU. Well, most cases in 2023 were found in post or express courier. I would assume that this is something that you might know as well, but in Europe, obviously, postal shipment is really now the most used mean of transport for counterfeit goods. Obviously, I don't need to mention you that the majority of cases found by customs are found in commercial traffic. It's 97 of the traffic compared to almost 3% in passenger traffic. So obviously, goods are seized in commercial traffic. And at the world level, as reported by the WCO, well, the trends are the same. We have mail coming as the first mean of transport, then express courier, and overall, they correspond to almost 78% of the seizures reported to the WCO by the member states. Now, talking about the types of intellectual property rights infringed. So those are the numbers at the external borders of the EU. While you see, I guess this is also a challenge that you face. We are talking mostly about trademark infringement. The first three category, this is the European trademark and the national trademark, international trademark as well. So you see, overall, this is over 84% of the goods, well, yeah, the goods which are seized infringed a trademark. For the reason of this situation, well, obviously trademarks are more infringed, but it could be as well, and this is something that we might want to discuss, because as a type of intellectual property right, maybe trademark is the easiest to detect and to stop. Maybe it's more complicated to detect designs or patents. And we see that in the EU as well, that we also try to raise awareness of custom officer on the other types of IP rights. But we believe as well that criminals are more involved in producing goods infringing trademarks than other types of rights. But design is also a type of IPR which is also important and which should not be overlooked. Then, in terms of trends, more than the numbers, in terms of modus operandi, well, those are the 5 trends that I wanted to mention to you, and maybe you also encounter them. The first one is not a new trend, but this is what I was telling you. We see really more and more production sites within the European Union, and this has been going on for a few years. Criminals move their illicit production sites closer to the points of distribution and closer to the selling points. And we saw, actually, I showed you the number, that since 2020, the seizures reported in the internal market of the EU really sharply increased. So last year, in 2023, it was over 138 million articles detained within the internal market, worth 2.7 billion euros. And that was really a record year for the EU in the internal markets. And this is an increase of 106% compared to the previous year. So we really see a lot of goods being produced, or at least finished, within the EU. Then the second trend we see as well, to advertise the goods. We see that the goods are still offered online, but not anymore, or at least less on website or on e-commerce platforms. They are offered through social media and through messaging applications. So we see more and more criminals offering the goods via WhatsApp, for instance, or Telegram, and then they redirect you to the website. But it's a bit more hidden, let's say, a bit more less direct than before, directly on e-commerce platform. And we do believe that this can be explained because the cooperation with e-commerce platforms on the issue of intellectual property crimes has developed a lot, and they also took a lot of action to fight against this phenomenon. But criminals are using another way. Then the third trend is that we see an increasing offer of low-priced goods. So as I was telling you, not only luxury goods, especially the SOCTA, the report I mentioned. They mentioned the increase of sales of counterfeit pesticides, of automotive spare parts, and other types of goods that we use every day. This we can explain. This can be one of the reasons by the living costs which have risen in the EU. So we could imagine that criminals are a business opportunity to develop this type of offer, and people do buy them knowingly or without knowing it. But that's what we see. Then the fourth trend is that we see that criminals are adjust very well, especially when they use especially with technology. They do use the latest technology, and we are still a bit unsure, but we do believe that obviously the use of artificial intelligence will be a threat in the coming years. It's not really clear how now, but we've seen criminals using 3D printing, for instance, to produce counterfeit goods. So we do believe that AI could, they would be involved, and they would be developing AI to produce counterfeit goods. Then the fifth trend I wanted to mention is also the sales, the offers of counterfeit medicines, especially thanks to the possibility to advertise online, to send them via shipment, via mail, and we see that all types of pharmaceutical products can be counterfeited. And especially at the moment, we see a rise in the sales of counterfeit weight loss products, anti-diabetic, and also hormonal substances at the EU level. Now, what's happening in Asia? Well, I don't really know. You will tell us. What we see, the sources of information we have tell us that you also have production sites in Asia. Maybe a bit more if the manufacturing has been transferred from China to Thailand or Indonesia. We also see retail sites, and we also see an issue of online piracy, which we will not cover during the workshop. But what I saw is that there are also a lot of efforts in enforcement. Those are the numbers that I found online for the enforcement results, which are publicly available. So I found the figures for Thailand, and those are the figures from all law enforcement authorities, so police and customs together, from 2020 and until 2024. Then Singapore as well, the intellectual property rights branch of the Singapore police reported 73 raids in 2024 against 43 in 2023, so a big increase. And I also had the numbers from Philippines, with seizures amounting to more than 40 billion pesos of counterfeit products from January to December last year. So efforts are here, obviously, but you do also face this phenomenon. Now, case examples. In the EU, I first wanted to show you some investigation to show you the trends that I just mentioned. This is a case that was investigated by the French police. The action date took place in October 2024, so quite recent, but the investigation started earlier, of course. It's a joint cooperation with France and Italy, and also the Swiss Federal Police. And you see on the picture, we are talking about counterfeit wines. So infringement of trademarks, infringement of geographical indication, and a lot of money to make because wine can be very, very expensive. So in this case, it was a criminal group based in Italy, and they were selling very, very expensive wines that we call Grand Cru, using French names, exporting outside of Europe as well. So they would produce the bottle in Italy. They would put a lower quality wine, of course. They would also have the labels printed by professional printers. They would assemble the bottles in Italy, and they would send them in Europe and abroad. So the French police did not only investigate IP crime, but also other offenses. As I told you, geographical indication, swindling, because this is obviously an offense, and also money laundering, because they were obviously using the illicit profits that they were making. You see the result. We're talking about 6 arrests, so a group, obviously, a criminal group, no doubt about this, and 14 house searches, so also activities a bit spread out in several locations, and obviously they seized all the material that they found on the spot. And this investigation in particular was supported by Eurojust, the European Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation, as I told you, and also Eurojust, which is the European Agency for Cooperation at judicial level, which is also something indispensable. You need to cooperate with police and also between judicial authorities. But as I told you, those products were made in the EU. But obviously they were not genuine. Then the second case I wanted to show you, also to illustrate this trend of a local production, is a case also supported by Europol. It's a bit older. It was done in 2021. And this time we're talking about perfumes, which is also quite an expensive product. Also with the risk for safety and health if the product is not of good quality, because this is something that you put on your body. So again, organized crime group based in Italy, with you see quite a professional production site. Those are the packaging. The perfume itself, the liquid, was ordered in bulk from the Balkan countries, so also outside of Europe. So you see, there's also they also do business like legitimate businesses with partners outside of the EU, but the products were assembled on the spot in Italy. You see, and again, quite good quality bottles and packaging. Going back to the results, you see 15 individuals reported to the judicial authority. So again, quite a big group with a very professional organization. And those are the material they seized on the spot. So they were managing quite an extensive and almost industrial production and distribution system. So those are investigations. Then I also wanted to show you joint operation, because this is what we do at EU level as well, because as you understood, usually criminals work cross borders, and they don't have issues in making business outside of their national country. So I just wanted to show you two initiatives very briefly. The first operation I wanted to mention is called the Operation Fake Star, and it is developed in the framework of Impact, which is the logo that you see here. And Impact is a mechanism of cooperation between law enforcement authorities of the European Union. I don't tell you more because this will be described more in detail by Kenny during his presentation. So I will not tell you more, but this is the framework for cooperation. And in that case, this operation targets primarily counterfeit clothes, shoes, and also fashion accessories. So basically all well-known brands and mostly sports and luxury brands. And this operation was proposed and coordinated by the Spanish National Police together with the Hellenic Financial Police, so the police from Greece. And it started in 2022. And at the beginning, 14 European countries took part, because obviously this is done on a voluntary basis. Each country decides to join or not to join. They also had non-EU countries, Serbia, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom, and also all the relevant European agencies. So Europol, Eurojust, the EU IPO, Frontex, which is the agency supporting the member states in the management of the external borders, and OLAF, which is the office in charge, the anti-fraud office of the European Union. And on the slide, you can see the results. So far, there were 3 editions. Those are the first results. And you see that the number of participating countries is increasing, meaning more and more countries are joining. And you see the results of the last operation. The report of the results, the analysis of the results is done by the EU IPO on the basis of the information, of course, sent by the European countries. And it has not been published yet. My colleagues are working on it, but they agreed to give me, and the Spanish police agreed to give me the first figures. So this is what you see on the slide. And again, you see quite a high number of articles seized, but also, and this is indeed also very important, the number of people arrested, 319 so far, because obviously beyond the seizures, you also need to work and to dismantle the organized group behind this trafficking. So those are the first results, and the report will be available quite soon. And then again, analyzing the operation, this is what we note as main trends. So that confirms what I told you. Assembling of the infringing products on site at the very last moment. They did some raids in shops in Spain, for instance, where you would have the shop, and then in the back of the shop, you would have a small room, and just before the shoes or the t-shirt would be placed for the customers, then they would put the tag and the label. So this is really done at the last moment. They also saw a lot of sales in private properties. So not only in shops, and mainly the products seized came from China and Turkey. And they also saw a lot of, more trademarks and brands being infringed. Then also, just to show you that we need to adjust to our environment, to the ongoing events, just wanted to show you what was done last year for the Olympic Games. They took place in Paris, in France. So obviously the French customs were very involved, and those are the products that they seized during the Olympic Games. They also started a cooperation with other EU countries. So all countries did some reinforced checks on this type of products. But this is the type of things they saw. You see the brand Paris is protected, Paris 2024. That was a registered trademark by the International Olympic Committee, and also by the committee organizing the Olympic Games. So this was not, this was illicit. This was not possible. And they seized a lot of, this is the mascot of the Olympic Games, and this is also protected by intellectual property. So they seized all types of goods. And that was just to show you that we need to adjust to our environment and to what's going on. We also, the EIPO also supported joint operations for the Euro Football Cup, because for those sports events, we also see obviously a rise in counterfeit goods with infringing trademarks of those sports clubs and also organizers of those sports events. So this is just a short conclusions that we will develop, I think, a bit further in the workshop. The fact that we are dealing with criminal networks, the fact that other types of crime are involved, and we should also investigate them, especially if it raises the penalties that can face, that the criminal can face. We see as well, and that's the SOCTA reporting this, for money laundering. They usually have classical methods, but we also lack a bit of intelligence, and this is also an aspect that needs to be tackled, the financial investigations on the cases. And if I showed you all this, usually I start with those numbers, but I wanted you to remember them. And maybe I wanted you to remind you why we are doing all of this. In Europe, those are the numbers of the damages to the EU economy. It was analyzed in 11 key sectors, and we see a loss of sales per year of 83 billion euros, and that would correspond to 670,000 jobs. So quite a lot. And we see in Europe that the small and medium enterprises are particularly affected. So I think this is why we need to protect intellectual property, and I would imagine that this is the same in your countries. And on the other hand, the companies which are what we call IPR intensive, those are their contribution to the economy, at least in the EU, 82 million jobs, direct jobs, indirect jobs, and we calculated that this represents 47% of the EU GDP. So for us, it's very clear why we need to protect intellectual property. And with this, I will thank you very much for your attention, and I will look forward to our discussion during this workshop. Thank you. Terima kasih.